Here we go. So obviously everyone, thanks for watching this. Me and Michael are joined today by Amber, who is an old friend of mine at school. And recently people have been seeing that we've been doing a lot of stuff for mental health, raising money for food banks, etc., and local charities. And what we've come up with is we're now going to be known over the next couple of weeks as Pools, which is going to be doing episodes like this. And this is the first episode of Mental Health Matters. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Amber. Thank you for joining today.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for having me as well. It's a pleasure.
So for those who obviously don't know you, Amber, can you just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your background, etc.?
Yep, so I'm Amber Stobbs. I went to school with Ross from the local Wallingham school, aren't we, Ross? So I grew up playing sports, playing football, and eventually I managed to go to Chelsea Football Academy, where I did my education alongside playing full-time. And managed to progress that into eventually getting a scholarship in America and then continuing to play and play professionally in England. I'm now playing for Crystal Palace, and Ross, I know you'll like that because you're a Crystal Palace fan. Look at that smile. I'm playing for Crystal Palace, and I have a full-time job in London as office manager, executive assistant. So that's kind of like the little bit about me. I guess, Ross, the reason you've asked me on this and to talk about mental health is because recently in lockdown in April last year, I finally opened up about my story of mental health, and it got shared quite well, got received quite well, and now it's great to see you guys doing stuff and creating awareness and kind of spreading the word, really, because I think that's really what's needed.
Yeah, definitely. I think what you're doing is absolutely amazing, and I think for you to come out and be as brave as you are is fantastic. So, for people who don't know, if you could share your mental health experience and what you've gone through, that'd be great.
Yeah, definitely. I think most people that do know me, like yourself, Ross, like in school and everything, I was always the bubbly, outgoing character, always up for a laugh. Just kind of really positive and sort of like nothing fazed me, if that makes sense. Whatever was happening outside of school, I could go to school, I could go to football training, I could just get on with things. But it wasn't until later that things started to catch up with me. So my first sort of experience actually was in secondary school. I didn't realise at the time, but I had a panic attack in the school hall. It was just lunchtime and I was speaking to one person and I didn't know what happened. I just remember going back, I remember like the room started getting a bit like fuzzy. I could hear loads of different conversations, sort of like those scenes in movies where someone's like going a bit out of it. My chest was really tight. I was short of breath and stuff like that. But it was a really short one, and it was like, "Oh, what was that? Like, what the hell was that?" And I didn't realize at the time. It wasn't until like 2 years later that it happened again, and then it started happening more frequently. And then, genuinely, probably about 3 years ago, I thought that was probably my first panic attack. Like that was the first time I had something to do with mental health. If you asked me there and then, I would have just been like, "Oh, I had a dizzy spell" or something like that. And they are quite different, but I used to downplay everything as well. So, and you'll find out as we'll talk more about my story, as I downplayed everything and thought, no, this is nothing. I'll just carry on with it. I was 17. I'd moved to America on a scholarship to play. So I'd moved to America for football. Lucky enough to go to university there as well. So I was getting my education. But my main purpose to begin with was just to play full time. And education at that point came second. Obviously, my views have changed on that now. But But I got injured, and it was a really tough time for me, and it hit me really, really hard. And it was nothing serious. The first year I landed on a sprinkler head on the pitch, but my season was ended because it was quite a big cut and needed a straight leg brace and stuff like that. Second year, broke my collarbone. Third year, broke the same collarbone, same fracture line, stuff like that. So injuries for me in the beginning were like, oh, this is really bad. I was really down about them. I didn't cope with them very well. They were giving me anxiety. The worst thing then was the depression. I was really, really down. But I kind of just didn't say anything about it and just thought, oh, this is what it's like to be really sad. And, you know, I've had, when I was a kid, we had losses in our family, and quite a lot, to be honest, and things that had happened. And I knew what it was to be sad from that sort of stuff. But I think looking back, there's a lot of things I haven't processed. And when something like the injury happens, it just kind of, I look back and I think that wasn't, you know, being sad, that was being sort of down and out and really, really depressed and things like that. So that was like the first early stages, and I thought I'd just get on with it and get by. And I mean, we're talking like months and months of sleepless nights, or being emotional, crying myself to sleep, and not being able to see like the light in anything. And I'd always put that mask on. So behind kind of closed doors, when I was in my room and going to sleep and stuff, I'd be really, really down and feel lonely and things like that. And again, like a really deep depression. But as soon as I had to leave my room and go to training with my team, it was like, right, put the mask on, go back out, be that bubbly Amber. And it just became a cycle. And again, like having shared my story, it became a cycle for eight years that I didn't tell anyone. And then there was days that I look back in those 8 years and I think, how did I live like that? Or how did I sort of, unfortunately it sounds really sad, but how did I make it through? Like, that's not okay to let yourself feel like that and not do anything about it. So that's sort of like the early things on in my experiences with mental health. But the biggest ones that hit me are, again, like I've spoke about, the depression and the anxiety. I've got counselling since and got help since, but when I share with the counsellors or share with people the levels of what I had, they're kind of astonished that I didn't tell anyone. I think that was like mainly due to just not accepting it myself.
Yeah, I mean, Amber, I was going to ask you, because obviously you've described kind of what some of the triggers and what was going on in your life at that time. Just kind of describe to us, how important was that counselling for you, and what difference did that make to you, you know, being able to come through it?
So it made a big difference for someone that I didn't tell another person for 4 or 5 years, and I just told that one person, and then I didn't tell another person for another 2 years. So it wasn't until like 6 years in that I ended up getting counselling or anything. So it was like a really long kind of journey and a long thing of just hiding it and keeping it to myself. And that's one of like, I don't want to say like regrets because it sounds harsh. I've obviously learned from that experience, and now I feel like I can help other people who aren't comfortable to share, and I've learned from that experience. So regret might seem like a really negative word, but I just know that looking back, if I did share sooner, my story may have been a bit shorter, or I would have been able to get to where I am today sooner. So in the facts of just sharing with a friend, it lifted a little bit off, but I had to choose someone that I really trusted and things like that, and it was a friend. When I eventually kind of really shared with another friend, they ended up sharing some articles with me, and I've shared this before on the other interviews and in my story, but they ended up sharing some articles with me, and it was an anonymous blog, and it was like 5 different links, but it was the same blog, and it was a story about someone's own personal experience, and it was really raw, it was really out there. It was written anonymously until like the last one of that kind of series that I read, and it was about this guy who had gone, you know, back and forth into getting help, and found himself in some really bad places, like the back of a police car, and the policeman said something to them that kind of changed his life around. He'd been admitted into hospital, and I was reading that, and my friend had shared it, and I was like, cool, that's quite deep. Like, you know, he shared it, but I'm not, you know, I'm not that bad. But then I actually think that there was a bit of me that was like, you're not this bad yet.
Yeah.
If you don't do something now, you will be that bad. You're not that far off, because I genuinely wasn't. And this person had been through some really tough times. And in the sixth or the final kind of article that I was reading, I scrolled down, and the hospital admittance kind of slip there was a picture of it on the website in between the blog, and it was actually my friend's name and the dates that he'd been admitted to hospital. So the person that shared it with me, although it seemed anonymous, it was actually him. And that for me was the biggest turning point in my life. I remember I was on the train back up to play for Everton, but I'd come home, shared with him something. And after reading that article, I was on the train, people were like looking at me, and I was like reading stuff, probably thought I was just working. I was literally like sobbing, like, wow, I'm shocked. So I was like shaking. I was like, this is unbelievable. He's been so brave and shared that. And kind of, it was like a big moment where it was like, you need to do something. So then when I got to Everton, I did get in contact with the doctors, got in contact with counselling, and that was the big turning point. I know that's a kind of a long-winded way of getting to your question, but just to give people background on why I did come to get that help and stuff. And the counselling it's unbelievable how much it helps me, just having someone there to talk to. I worked through a lot of stuff. Being open and honest, I still have counselling weekly now, because I do still think that it's a ongoing journey. It's not, I've tried before where I've got to a point in counselling and thought, yeah, I'm good now, I'll kind of step away from it. And then a cycle again happened, or something would happen and it would knock me down again, and I'd come back to it. That's not to say that if somebody's got one instance that they're working on and need to work with, and they've got a counsellor and they come out the other side, they might feel like they don't need it anymore. But with me, unfortunately, it's an ongoing thing. Hopefully one day I'll step away from it. But in my experiences, it's, you kind of graduate away from it rather than just saying, I feel happy. Because I've done that before, like I was saying, like, 12 sessions, okay, I feel happy, I'm good, I'm gone, kind of close the door in the counselling, try and live your life again, and then I felt myself slipping back down. So it's really important for me. I still do it weekly now. I know some people might think, oh, that's a lot, or, well, how can you be speaking about it if you're still going through stuff? But for me, in my opinion, and especially my experiences, mental health is an ongoing thing that we need to stay in tune with, and keep kind of ticking well. You don't just recover from a cold and then think, right, I'm going to live my life the way I'm going to live it, whether that's not sleeping enough, not eating enough and stuff like that. It's the same with your mind. So yeah, I can't express how important the counselling is for me, and I think for people out there that are going through mental health.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, there's so many different ways with mental health. It's a silent disease, and obviously, it just shows once you get a chance to speak to someone how much pressure it takes off your shoulders, and physically and mentally how much it helps you. So anyone who is watching, who feels like they can't do it, you can, and that's the message that we want to get across. That people can talk about their feelings, and we want to show that there are so many people with experiences, and if it wasn't people like you, Amber, that come out and actually said, look, what's happened, then no one would know. So obviously that's fantastic that you've given us an insight to how you've dealt with it. Do you think there's enough support? I know there's a lot of support that you see out there, the big sort of branded companies for mental health, but for the smaller little charities, do you feel there's a lot out there?
I don't think there's enough. I think it's people like you guys that are trying to make a difference, that are kind of breaking down those barriers and hopefully making the help and support more accessible to people. But I've been fortunate in some cases that football clubs have helped me, or that's a tricky one, because to be honest, as an athlete, I haven't been open with my football clubs because it's always that. Another thing is like the stigma, right? So it's all about talking about it and breaking down the stigma. And I never would believe in the stigma. So if my friend told me that they had mental health problems, I wouldn't look at them in a different light. But to be honest, I allowed myself to be a victim of the stigma because I thought people would look at me in a different light, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So even though I didn't believe in it and I would never judge anyone for their stuff, I was always a bit concerned about, would my football manager, would my club treat me differently, see me differently if I opened up to them. So I'm going through this. I was going through this mental health when I was really bad, and I'm talking about I was having panic attacks through training. So if anybody knows what a panic attack is, like, one of the symptoms is like increased heart rate and shortness of breath. And if you can't breathe with that, instead of fighting against it and letting it kind of, there's different levels, but it kind of takes over, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So the thing is, I was trying to stop one, but at the same time, I'm in the middle of training where I'm trying to compete for a spot. I'm trying to run around. And when you're running around, your heart rate naturally increases, and your breath, you've got to breathe heavier and harder to get your body going. So I was genuinely battling between this side having a panic attack and stopping them symptoms, and this side trying to compete for a spot in training, but I didn't want to tell my coaches or any of the players. So I think like I felt like that in those environments and sports and stuff, because of the stigma. But I think that people, and coming away from the pitch, I felt otherwise, that there's not enough support. So I remember some of my first support was like, you know, you get kind of prescribed like 6 sessions or something with a CBT counsellor, which is great. But I remember having those 6 and they were funded. And then after the funding ran out, to be honest, for me, it was like, what am I supposed to do next? Because I don't know if you're aware, but women's football is not a money game, and you're not paid well. So when I was really bad in my first professional contract, which is like 6 years ago now, the money that we were getting paid, to be honest, I wouldn't have been able to afford counselling.
Yeah.
And that's the truth of it. And I was like, to be honest with you, I was kind of thinking, should I fill up my car with petrol this month, like this week, kind of like looking at the money. And I thought one of the most important things is mental health. And why am I worried about my car petrol if I can't keep my mind in a good place and stuff like that? But that battle must be there for so many people, because it is really expensive. And although it's the most important thing, I think, it doesn't necessarily mean that there's room to take your finance away from other things, like the necessities, you know. It was quite interesting. I did one of the charities that helped me before. I met someone through there, and the person said, I agree with what you're saying, you can't afford it, but what's the point of worrying about what you can put in your mouth, like what you can eat and stuff and put on the table, if you can't keep your mind right? Surely your money goes there first. But unfortunately, that's not the reality for a lot of people.
Also.
So I think, in short, there's not enough support out there that makes it more accessible. I know there's a lot of people like yourself and great people that are trying to do things, but I think that it would just help with more funding and more support from the bigger companies and things like the government and things like that, making things more reachable. And I think education as well needs to be high up on that list, because we never learned about this stuff at school. So I didn't know what panic attack was when I had one in the school hall. I didn't know what it was when I had one later on. We're taught about like, you know, the citizenship classes and things like that. It should really be on the syllabus to educate even younger kids about mental health and well-being.
Absolutely. I think that's why it's so important and great that you've come on and you've been able to speak, because, you know, by you speaking out, you will encourage other people to speak out, most notably young women as well, which is exactly what we want. I completely agree with you on what you've said about government funding. You know, we hope that as this grows, and, you know, as you said, more people that are doing this, I think there will come a time where there will be more pressure on the government to fund these sorts of things to help people, because, you know, we talk about being in a global pandemic at the moment with what's gone on, but actually I think mental health's been a huge problem for a number of years now, and we haven't tackled it. But I think another question from me, Amber, is when I don't know at what point you kind of opened up to people and maybe told family members, friends, but I'm always interested in what sort of reaction did you get when you first, you know, told them about what you'd been going through, and, you know, when you said, look, this has been something that's going on for years, you know, what sort of reaction did you get from them?
I've not had a negative reaction from telling anyone, and that goes to the article, because Crystal Palace helped me share the article. They put it on the women's website, the men's website. It was widely shared on social media and things like that. And I think nowadays in social media and things like that, especially in women's sports, unfortunately, there could be a lot of room for negative comments and things like that. I didn't get anything like that publicly, and I certainly haven't got anything like that with friends, family. And I've ended up sharing with people that I don't know too well, because of my story's out there. I want to share as much as possible, because when my friend shared with me, it changed my life around. So if I can do that to one person, that's the reason of me sharing my story. But I've always found it a lot easier to, and this is the honest truth, like do things like this. Ross, obviously I know you from school, but it's the people that are really close to me that I struggled to share with, because I was almost doing this protecting thing. So my family, the the first person I shared with was actually my best friend from school, like Ross knows her, Shauna. And that was the first person I shared with and just said, this has happened. And that was a while ago, but still wasn't, within the first few years of stuff, because I just was so like kind of scared of it, in denial, not accepting it, not aware of it. Like just my knowledge was not switched onto it. And as I said, I was really positive and bubbly. So it was the complete opposite of what I'd expect. So I shared it with her, and I knew she's my best friend, knows me inside out. Her response was amazing. Shared it with my one friend. His response was to share the other articles with me. But the thing that was really hard was sharing it with my family. I waited 7 years to share it with my family, and I'm talking, I was in really serious dark places, and I was going 5 or 6 panic attacks a day at some points. I couldn't get out of bed. I have spoken about how I was playing professionally, but the only time I'd leave my bed or be ready or available to do anything was just 5 minutes before I had to leave for training. I was, being physically ill. I was really bad. I shared a house with teammates, and we used to car share. And when I got really bad, I was like, go on, I'm going to be late. Like, I've just got to do something. Like, I'll catch you up. But it was because I physically couldn't sit in the car on the way to training with them. I'd be having panic attacks, being really emotional on the way and stuff. I didn't tell that club. I didn't tell clubs. I didn't tell 3 or 4 clubs after that. Palace is the first club that I've turned up on my first day. And when I was talking about signing with them, that I was really open about it, because I ended up stepping away from football for 8 months. And at the time, I genuinely saw it as retirement, and that was it. But Palace have responded really well, and they've obviously helped me share it with everyone, the article and stuff. But going back to sharing it with my family, it was just something that I really struggled with. When I was playing in Everton, which was after seeing my friend's article and him sharing it, and then finally going to the doctors, getting mental health support and counselling and stuff, I thought I'd spoken to a counsellor a lot about telling them. And it was like this protecting mentality that I don't want to tell them because I don't want them to worry. And one thing I'd say is, if I didn't tell them, and whilst I was trying to protect them, in the long run, I was probably doing more damage, because eventually, if I wasn't sharing and I didn't share it with them, or share it with a counsellor, or share it with friends, like, God knows where I would have ended up. And I think that place that I would have ended up in, whether it's, the worst circumstance or a really bad one, would have been worse for my family to take than the news that I'm dealing with mental health. And it's genuinely to say that, like, I don't think I'd be here today without sharing. And you protect all those around you, but you sort of forgetting about yourself. Whilst I'm protecting others and not sharing it, it's all bundling up inside. It's all, I'll take this on my own, I'll be in denial, I'm not facing it. And it's kind of like the risk reward thing, because what's upsetting my family and dealing with it together as a group, my family is so supportive as well. This isn't a reflection of them, this is all a reflection of me by not sharing it. Because I didn't accept it myself. So in sharing it has been the most useful thing that I've ever done, changed my life around massively, never had a negative response. And I'm not here saying to people, if you're feeling any of this, go and share, it's easy, because it definitely isn't easy. And to be honest with you, I shared it with my family via an email, which is quite shocking. And some people I've told that are like, an email, like, and I was like, it was the only way I could get the words across that would make sense, because they were visiting me in Everton, for my away games. They'd come up quite regularly, and I remember them driving up, and I was like getting nervous, and I was going, right, this is the weekend, I'm going to sit them down, I'm going to speak to them. And at the time it was like my mum, my dad and my nan, every now and then my brother as well. And I thought, this is the time, they're coming up. And I remember being upstairs being like, going to go downstairs, we're having a fine day, like, just sit them down and talk about it, it's fine. And I just couldn't. I physically couldn't do it. And I tried for months and tried so many times, to the point of, I thought, the only way I can actually share this is if I write it down.
Yeah.
And I did it. And like, it's a bit like, you wrote it down, you shared with your family, like reading that as parents must be absolutely awful, because of, it wasn't to the point of, I've shared it in my first year. So guys, this has happened over the last 8 years, and this has been really bad, and I've got like bad depression, anxiety, and my parents were like reading it on an email. But I'm sort of sharing that now because of I don't want people to sit here and think she's confident, she's speaking about this on a podcast, on an interview. It's always been easy for her to share. It wasn't. It took me 8 years to tell my family. Here I am, 11 years later doing this. So the difference in the 8 years to now is like amazing. What I'm willing to share and open up and talk to people, because I think it is hard for people to do.
Yeah, definitely. I think, honestly, hats off to you. You should be proud of yourself, because it's an amazing achievement to come out and openly talk about it. As you said, it is so hard to talk about. It's not easy. It's probably the worst thing in the world at some points. But I just wanted to just bring you back on that point. You saying that if you could just help one person, then that's obviously amazing. And this is what we've said from the start. If this does get out to one person, or it makes one person open up, or just change their view on how mental health is, or they can express their feelings, then we've done a job. So I honestly really appreciate you coming on today. I think you've been absolutely fantastic. And for anyone who does need support or needs any help or someone to talk to, there are so many people out there to do it too. So I really do appreciate it.
No, thank you. Thanks for having me as well. I know it's not an easy thing to share. That's what I'm saying. Like, I've lived it. I haven't shared. I have shared. And even now, if I meet someone new, it sounds ridiculous, but someone that I'm now going to be closely working with, joint our company, and I'm that open that I've just said, like, we're going to work directly together, and I've just said, like, oh yeah, on Wednesday mornings, I have like counselling, because I'm that open to it, and I want people to know, because I think the more we speak about it, like you said, changing. It is helping people that deal with it, but it's also kind of educating and helping those people that don't have to deal with it and stuff, because of that changes like the amount around it, and more conversations and things that are happening, things like what you guys are doing is honestly amazing. It will just change people's lives.
Yeah, no, really.
You say that, Amber, though, as well. I think, like Ross has touched on, I think you should be so proud of yourself. And the amazing thing is we hear a lot of stories of people that have obviously suffered from it. But for you to sit there and say, look, I've come through it. This is the steps that I took. You've told us how difficult it's been as well, which is important, because it's not an overnight process. So yeah, you say about what we're doing, but actually it's people like you that we need. And I think your story will encourage, as I said, a lot of people to speak out. And that's only positive. So yeah, thanks again. And like Ross said, you should be so proud of yourself.
Thank you very much. It's the other thing is that I'm not sitting here saying this was my past. I'm sharing because I'm over it. This is my past. And again, with the Palace sharing things and me telling Palace, I didn't want to wait till I've properly stopped playing or actually stuck to retirement to share it, because I want people like in the game, or people in their current jobs, or people that are still dealing with it, to feel like it's okay to share it and not be viewed differently. I think it's great for anyone to share whatever stage they're at. If it is they've shared because they've come through it and they don't feel the effects of it anymore, that's amazing. But I am here as someone that still deals with it on a daily, weekly basis, and have learnt to live with it and work with it rather than fight against it. That's a big thing for people out there. I think it makes a massive difference.
Brilliant. Well, again, thank you very much. And obviously, cheers for joining us today.
No problem. Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Thanks, Amber.